Imagine walking into a room where everything is starting to fall apart. Voices are rising. People are talking over each other. The tension in the air is thick enough to feel in your chest. Someone is blaming someone else. Another person is trying to defend themselves. The pressure keeps building, minute by minute, like a storm that's about to break. And then, if you look carefully, you will almost always notice something strange. There is one person in the room who isn't reacting like everyone else. They aren't raising their voice. They aren't rushing to defend themselves. They aren't panicking or scrambling for control. Instead, they speak slower. They pause before answering. Their body language is steady, almost grounded, as if the chaos around them belongs to a different world. At first, it might look like confidence, or maybe emotional distance. Some people even assume they simply don't care. But psychology tells a very different story. People who stay calm in the middle of chaos are not emotionless. Their brains are not empty of fear, anger, or stress. In fact, their nervous system registers those signals just like everyone else's. The real difference is what happens next. While most people react instantly to pressure, calm individuals run a far more complex mental process in the background. Their brain slows the moment down just enough to create space between stimulus and reaction. And inside that tiny space, something powerful happens. Choice. To understand why some people remain calm under pressure, we need to look at what is actually happening inside the brain the moment stress appears. Every time you face a threat, whether it's a harsh email from a coworker, a public mistake during a meeting, or a sudden crisis, your brain runs an ancient survival program. At the center of this system is a small almond-shaped structure called the amygdala. The amygdala is the brain's alarm system. Its job is simple: detect danger and trigger an immediate response. When it believes something is threatening you, it floods the body with stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. Your heart rate rises, your muscles tense, your mind prepares to fight, argue, defend itself, or escape. For much of human history, this system kept us alive. But in modern life, the danger is rarely a predator in the wild. Instead, it might be criticism, embarrassment, rejection, or conflict. Yet the brain often reacts as if the threat were physical. This is where many people get caught in what psychologists call an amygdala hijack. The emotional brain fires so quickly that the rational part of the brain barely has time to respond. Words are spoken before they are thought through. Anger rises instantly. Stress takes control. However, in people who remain calm, a different system steps in before the emotional reaction fully takes over. Another region of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, intercepts the signal. This part of the brain is responsible for reasoning, long-term thinking, and self-control. Instead of reacting immediately, it evaluates the situation. Is this actually dangerous? Is this worth reacting to? What response will improve the outcome? This moment of evaluation changes everything. Instead of emotion driving behavior, the brain creates space for a deliberate response. And that small shift from reaction to reflection is what allows calm people to stay composed while everyone else is being pulled into the storm. Now here is where the real difference begins to appear. Between the moment something happens and the moment you react, there is a tiny window of time. Most people never notice it. It passes too quickly. The emotion rises, the reaction follows, and the moment is already over. But calm people experience that moment differently. Instead of reacting immediately, their brain creates what psychologists call a psychological pause. It might only last 1, 2, or 3 seconds. Yet those few seconds can completely change the outcome of a situation. Imagine someone cuts you off in traffic. Instantly, irritation shoots through your body. Your chest tightens. Your jaw clenches. the emotional brain is already preparing a reaction. Maybe anger, maybe a shout, maybe a burst of frustration. For many people, the reaction happens automatically, but someone with a trained, regulated mind does something subtle. They pause. In that pause, the emotional surge is noticed, but not obeyed. The brain takes a breath before deciding what to do next. Instead of emotion grabbing the steering wheel, the rational mind steps in to guide the response. Psychologists refer to this ability as response flexibility. It means you're not trapped by your first emotional impulse. You can choose what happens next. The calm person still feels the irritation, the frustration, even the anger, but they do not allow that feeling to instantly dictate their behavior. They create just enough distance to think clearly. And that small gap, those 3 quiet seconds, often separates the person who escalates chaos from the one who quietly takes control of the situation. Once a calm person creates that brief psychological pause, another powerful mental process begins to take place. Psychologists call this process cognitive reappraisal. In simple terms, cognitive reappraisal means changing the meaning you assign to a situation. And surprisingly, the meaning you give an event often determines how strongly you react to it. Consider a common scenario. 2 travelers are standing at an airport check-in counter. Their flight has just been cancelled, and the airline agent in front of them is clearly stressed and impatient. The agent speaks abruptly and dismissively. To a reactive mind, the interpretation is immediate and personal. They're being disrespectful. They're treating me like I don't matter. This is unacceptable. Within seconds, frustration builds into anger. The brain interprets the situation as a personal attack, and the emotional temperature rises quickly. But a calm mind processes the same situation very differently. Instead of personalizing the interaction, they reinterpret it. Their internal dialogue might sound more like this: "This agent is overwhelmed. The system is probably failing today. This situation isn't about me. It's about a problem that needs solving." The external situation hasn't changed. The flight is still cancelled, the agent is still stressed, but the emotional response is completely different. This happens because calm individuals are less likely to fall into a common mental bias known as personalization, the tendency to interpret neutral or stressful events as direct attacks on our identity or worth. By stepping back and reframing the event, they reduce the emotional intensity before it spirals out of control. In other words, they don't see the world through the lens of ego. They see it through the lens of context. And this subtle shift from "this is happening to me" to "this is simply happening" allows calm minds to stay grounded even when circumstances are anything but calm. At this point, a natural question begins to surface. If cognitive reframing and emotional control are so powerful, why do some people seem to develop these abilities while others struggle with them for years? The answer often lies in experiences most people never see. Many individuals who appear exceptionally calm today did not develop that composure in peaceful circumstances. More often, it was shaped during periods of intense difficulty, major loss, failure, illness, financial collapse, long stretches of uncertainty where nothing felt stable or predictable. Psychologists sometimes describe this process as psychological resilience, the mind's ability to adapt and reorganize after hardship. But resilience rarely develops in theory. It develops through exposure to real storms. When someone has survived enough crises, their internal definition of danger begins to change. A harsh comment at work still stings, but it no longer feels catastrophic. A delayed project feels inconvenient, not life-threatening. Conflict still exists, but it no longer triggers panic in the same way. Their nervous system has learned something important. Not every problem deserves the same level of alarm. Think of someone who has rebuilt their life after losing a business, or a person who has endured months of illness and uncertainty. Compared to those experiences, a tense meeting or an aggressive email carries far less weight. Over time, this repeated exposure to adversity reshapes the brain's response to stress. Situations that once felt overwhelming begin to look manageable. The emotional threshold rises. Instead of reacting instantly, the mind quietly asks a different question. Is this truly a crisis, or just a difficult moment? This shift in perspective creates a deep form of stability. People who have faced real storms tend to conserve their emotional energy. They know panic rarely improves the situation, and because they have survived chaos before, they trust their ability to move through it again. In many cases, the calmest person in the room is simply someone who has already seen worse, and learned that composure is often the most powerful response available. Long before modern psychology began studying emotional regulation, ancient philosophers were already exploring the same question. How can a person remain steady in an unpredictable world? One of the most influential answers came from a philosophy known as Stoicism. At its core, Stoicism is built around a simple but powerful idea. There are things you can control, and there are things you cannot. Much of human suffering comes from confusing the two. Traffic, other people's opinions, unexpected setbacks, criticism, mistakes. These are largely outside your control, but your response to them always belongs to you. Roman emperor and Stoic thinker Marcus Aurelius wrote that external events are not what disturb us. It is our judgment about those events that creates distress. In other words, the problem is rarely the situation itself. The problem is the meaning we attach to it. Centuries later, psychiatrist Viktor Frankl described a similar idea when he wrote, "Between stimulus and response there is a space. Within that space lies our freedom to choose how we respond." Stoicism trains the mind to live inside that space. Instead of chasing total control over the outside world, a battle no one can win, the Stoic focuses on mastering the internal one. Thoughts, reactions, interpretations, and actions become the true arena of control. This mindset creates remarkable psychological stability. When you stop trying to control everything around you, your energy shifts toward controlling what truly matters, your own mind. And from that perspective, calmness is not weakness or indifference, it is disciplined inner strength. Calmness doesn't only shape how a person feels internally, it also changes how others perceive them. In almost every social situation, authority naturally flows toward the least reactive person in the room. You can see this pattern during arguments, tense meetings, or moments of crisis. When someone begins to shout, interrupt, or lose control of their emotions, something subtle happens to their social standing. Even if their words are valid, their credibility begins to weaken. People instinctively associate emotional volatility with instability. The louder the reaction becomes, the less control it appears that person has over themselves. Now look at the individual who does the opposite. They lower their voice instead of raising it. They listen before speaking. They pause before answering. Their breathing remains steady, their posture grounded. In the middle of chaos, they appear composed. Psychologists sometimes describe this phenomenon through the concept of prestige-based authority. Unlike dominance, which relies on intimidation or aggression, prestige comes from perceived competence, stability, and self-control. When someone remains calm under pressure, the brain of everyone around them begins to interpret that behavior as a signal of safety and competence. Humans are naturally drawn toward individuals who appear stable when circumstances are uncertain. This is why calm individuals often become informal leaders in stressful environments. They may not demand attention, yet people begin to look toward them for cues on how to react. Their presence subtly regulates the emotional atmosphere of the room. In fact, emotions are highly contagious within groups. Panic spreads quickly, but so does stability. When one person maintains composure, it can lower the collective tension of everyone nearby. This is the quiet power of emotional authority. Calm people do not need to dominate a conversation or force their influence. Their nervous system communicates something powerful on its own, that the situation can be handled. And when others sense that confidence, respect tends to follow naturally. Behind the behavior of calm individuals, there is also a deeper biological process at work inside the body. Much of our emotional state is regulated by the autonomic nervous system, which operates largely outside of conscious control. This system has two major branches that constantly balance each other. The first is the sympathetic nervous system, often called the fight or flight system. It prepares the body to react quickly to danger. Heart rate increases, breathing becomes shallow, muscles tense, the mind scans for threats. The second is the parasympathetic nervous system, sometimes described as the rest and digest system. It slows the body down, lowers heart rate, deepens breathing, and allows the brain to think more clearly. Calm individuals tend to activate this second system more effectively when pressure rises. Instead of allowing the body to spiral deeper into stress, their nervous system gradually shifts toward regulation. Their breathing slows, their voice becomes steadier, their movements remain controlled. These physical signals are not only internal, they are also visible to others. Human beings unconsciously read each other's nervous systems. When someone nearby appears tense or panicked, it often increases our own stress response. But when a person remains grounded and composed, the opposite can happen. Their calmness begins to regulate the emotional environment around them. This is why a single steady individual can sometimes stabilize an entire group during a stressful moment. Their biology is quietly sending a message to everyone else. The situation may be difficult, but it is still manageable. At this point, calmness might sound like an ideal psychological trait, something everyone should strive for. But here is an important truth that psychology often emphasizes. Not all calmness is healthy. On the surface, two very different emotional states can look exactly the same. The first is emotional regulation. This is the type of calmness we've been exploring so far. A person feels their emotions fully, anger, frustration, disappointment, but they process those feelings before responding. The emotion is acknowledged, understood, and guided. The second type is emotional suppression. From the outside, it can look identical. The person does not shout, they do not argue. They appear quiet, controlled, and composed, but internally, their nervous system is under intense pressure. Instead of processing their emotions, they bury them. Often, this pattern begins early in life. Some people grow up in environments where expressing anger or sadness is discouraged or even punished. Over time, the brain learns that showing emotion is unsafe, so the safest strategy becomes silence. They smile when they are hurt. They agree when they actually disagree. They avoid conflict even when something deeply bothers them. But suppressed emotions rarely disappear. They accumulate beneath the surface. Over months or years, this constant internal pressure can lead to chronic stress, burnout, or sudden emotional breakdowns. In some cases, people become so disconnected from their feelings that they experience a form of emotional numbness known as dissociation. True calmness is not the absence of emotion. It is the ability to experience emotion without being controlled by it. So where does all of this leave us? The ability to stay calm is not reserved for a special group of people. It is not something you are simply born with or without. Like any mental skill, calmness can be trained and strengthened over time. And the starting point is surprisingly simple. The next time you feel anger rising, stress building, or frustration pushing you to react, try one small experiment. Pause for 3 seconds. Take a slow breath in. Let it out slowly. Those 3 seconds may feel insignificant, but neurologically, they are powerful. In that brief pause, you interrupt the automatic reaction of the amygdala and give your prefrontal cortex a chance to step in. From there, you can begin to practice the other habits we discussed, slowing your speech, reframing situations, and choosing responses instead of reacting blindly. Over time, those small pauses begin to reshape how your mind handles pressure. Calmness is not the absence of emotion, it is the mastery of it. So now I'm curious about you. When you face stressful situations, do you tend to react immediately, or do you naturally create that psychological pause? Share your experience in the comments below. I read every one of them. And if you enjoy exploring the psychology behind human behavior, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more deep dives like this. Stay curious, stay steady, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you for watching.